I'm Darren Morton.
I'm Simon Matthews. This is Lift,
The Lifestyle Medicine podcast, where we dive into the science of health and wellbeing. Simon, my friend, how are you, brother?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well. Yeah.
Very well.
A little bit. There's been a heat wave in southern Europe, and so we've had a few days of 40 degrees. Or for our US colleagues, I don't know. I think it's about 102, 103, something like that. So, backed off a little bit. So,
I'd be happy for you to share just a little bit of that with us over here. As you can see, I'm wearing a jacket. It's getting to that time of year, which I don't enjoy quite as much. So a little bit more heat would be nice, but.
Yeah.
But anyway, seasons are good.
I was actually going to do this podcast with my shirt off, but apparently that's not the done thing. So
no, well, we'd have to, they have to manage the crowd and that we come flocking this way. Hey, I've been away though. I've actually, speaking of escaping to the Northern Hemisphere, I've been away. So I've got a couple of quiz questions for you. And first question, because we have chatted. Well,
I love quiz questions.
Good. I'm sure you're good at them. So first question, where did I go and how do you spell it?
Oh, well, that's pretty easy. You went to, I think I'm correct in saying this, a very small country called Bhutan.
Yes.
And it's spelt with a silent H.
It is. That's correct.
H-B-U-T-A-N. No, I'm only joking. B-H-U-T-A-N.
All right, you're 1 for 1. Okay, so what is Bhutan? And I did, and it was an amazing experience, and I'll share more about why I went there in just a little bit. But what's it sort of famous for?
Oh, now there's. Okay, now there's. Do you know? Well, so there's one thing I'm pretty confident of, and there's another thing that's in the back of my mind that perhaps I'm wrong about. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I believe that Bhutan generates a great deal of electricity.
You are correct about that.
Okay. That's the thing I'm not so sure about. But
Right.
and like a disproportionate amount for the size of the country.
That's
and
correct.
I think that's the key factor there.
Yes, and it's actually one of its big exports. So yeah, I'm impressed that you knew this little fact because I didn't know before when I arrived. I didn't know this when I was over there. But yeah, hydro. So they're in the Himalayas, base of the Himalayas there. A lot of hydroelectricity, which they export, and for that reason, they are the world's only carbon negative country. So they're not just carbon neutral.
Okay, I didn't know that. They're carbon negative.
Negative with the credits that they accrue.
Yeah, wow.
So
wow.
yes, that's true. That's one interesting little thing that they're famous for. Another one.
Yeah. The other one.
Sorry.
Oh, there's another one that I'm reasonably confident of. Another thing about Bhutan that I know that I'm reasonably confident of. Many countries use a metric called gross national product. It's to measure economic performance.
Yeah, GDP.
And GDP, that's exactly right. And gross domestic. That's gross domestic product. Yeah, gross national product, GDP. I think I'm not an economist, but I think that's the same thing. But Bhutan uses not a measure of product, but a measure of happiness. Gross, and I'm not sure whether they call it gross national happiness or gross domestic happiness or something slightly different, but that's the intention of it. They've established a metric and a scale of determining the collective happiness of the nation.
That's exactly right. And you're right. So it's gross national happiness, so GNH.
GNH, okay.
And it's their guiding metric. So they sort of departed from GDP, from economic growth and moved more towards this, gross national happiness, the well-being, flourishing of their nation. So, and in fact, I thought, being as enlightened as you are and well-read as you are, I thought I thought that would have been the first thing that you'd identified. So you're right. So the other, the carbon negative part, that's an interesting little side fact. So here's my final question for you. Do you know when they adopted gross national happiness as their guiding metric?
Oh, now the short answer is no. I don't know exactly when, but I believe, my sense is that it has been established as a national measure for a significant amount of time. So it's for example, it's not something that's just emerged in the last 5 years while we've been focused on the benefits of positive psychology, for example.
Yes. Yes, so the answer is a little nuanced to that, to be honest, because it was actually, so they became a monarchy in 1907, and it was their fourth king throughout the 1980s and 90s that took a very deliberate interest in well-being. And so there was a very strong interest in that intentionality around, hey, you know what? We're a beautiful little country, based here, and they are quite small, about the size of Belgium, I think, or even a little smaller. But resource rich, a beautiful country, quite untapped and untainted by civilization. And what they realised is that I think they saw what was happening to some of the countries around them, and they went, no, we want to decide different here. And so the fourth king started to use this terminology around national happiness. And so that was sort of, there was murmurings and rumorings of that probably from about the 1980s, but it was actually 2008. So in 2008, something very, very interesting happened, and very atypical, I would say, from in terms of world leaders. And that was the fourth king, who was at the time in his early 50s and very loved. And so almost at the height of his popularity. What had been interesting, and chatting with many of the people over there, and including I got to meet with some of the members of government there, he almost orchestrated this. It sounds like I got the impression that he'd almost been orchestrating this for decades, not in public forums, not in a public way. But what he started to do is get representation from different parts and different pockets and different regions of the country to try and have a voice. And then what he did in this, and I'm not sure how many times this has happened throughout history, but in 2008, he actually handed it over as a democracy. So it was actually established as a constitutional democracy at that point in time. And so, I think perhaps, particularly in today, the world stage, like, it's pretty uncommon for someone to relinquish power like that. But he did, particularly at the height of their popularity and power. But this is clearly what he saw as the best thing for the country.
The future of the country, yeah.
And did a couple of other really interesting at that same time. So created the constitutional monarchy. So made the ruling, by democracy. He actually stepped down as king and made his son the fifth king. As at that time, he put in place, for example, I think the king can only rule to the age of 65, and then must step down and hand over the reins. I think there were rulings like 60% of the country cannot be touched; it has to remain, in virgin rainforest and pristine. So very, very intentional and really quite profound that and commendable, that someone would go to these lengths to do it. And what's interesting, so from 2008, the fifth king, so his son, has really carried that mantle and once again been very much an advocate of gross national happiness. In fact, one of the things that I learned, I hadn't heard about this, but they have a city that they're creating, which is essentially going to be a mindfulness city. And the name of it escapes me. It's the Cephalus, I think, or something. Mindfulness city. So GMC, the GMC, and it will be this very eco-friendly destination because they're quite strategically positioned because they've got China to the north, India to the south, all on one side, Thailand on the other. So there's it's sort of like they see this as a bit of a hub. So they're trying to create this sort of eco mindfulness center where people could come in and would be world leading, really in the promotion of wellbeing. It's a fascinating place. Fascinating. There is one other thing that it's known for, actually, and I don't know if you were going to get this one. Is there anything else that you know?
No, but I do like quizzes, and I hate being told the answer outright. So give me a hint.
Okay, it has to do with an aphrodisiac. Does that help? Where are you going with that one?
So, not being familiar with this genre of pharmaceuticals.
Yes. So, not speaking from personal experience here. Yeah, keep going.
Well, it has to do with. I have no idea.
All right, let me help you out there. So there is a particular fungus called cordyceps, and
cordyceps. I know cordyceps. Yeah.
Cordyceps. Yeah. So this particular fungus only grows over 4,000 meters elevation, which obviously parts of the country are at that altitude, and it's quite a unique little process. And so I'm not. I don't have any shares in cordyceps, or I don't have any vested interest in promoting the benefits of it. I don't even know if there's any evidence that works. I'm not, but the theory is that it's fungus that grows on worms. So up in above 4,000 meters, these little worms get this fungus on them, and that's the stuff that they're after. And apparently it's an aphrodisiac. So what's really,
do you have to eat the worm to get the cordyceps, or do you scrape the cordyceps off the worm first?
I think you actually soak the worm. It comes with the worm and the fungus on it, and I think you soak the worm in some fluid, and then you consume it that way, and then at the end you can eat the worm. Apparently.
So this is sounding like tequila.
Something like that. Exactly. So, but from a lifestyle medicine perspective, what is super intriguing about it, because I had the good fortune of having dinner with the Minister for Health of the country, which was a great pleasure. And he was talking with me about some of the challenges they're facing. And one of them he mentioned, which really jumped out at me because I have a great interest in this area at the moment. He spoke about how harvesting these cordyceps is quite a challenge. Once for one, you're above 4,000 meters, and they're quite hard to spot. So it's not like easy just go picking blueberries off the tree kind of thing. So there's quite a skill to it, and it's very remote, and so there's limited access to it. And so, but what happened is when this started to get notoriety for its proposed purposes, all of a sudden there was great demand, and it's very expensive now. And so the people that do harvest it, that live in these very remote areas, have actually become really quite wealthy. And by their previous standards. And what's happened is, and this so insightfully said, and with that has come the demise of their health. So they're actually chronic diseases amongst these people because as a status, if you can afford these rich foods, some of them just have huge amounts, because they can afford it, hoard huge amounts of food that's not so, it's more harm producing than health producing. And he said, so we actually see, real challenges with regards to type 2 diabetes and a whole range of other chronic conditions. So, it makes me think once again, and I know we've chatted about this before on the podcast, the work of Gary Egger, who shows that connection between economic growth and chronic disease, the poor health of people and and so there's a really nice case in point of that occurring again.
So this will be an interesting topic, I think, for a future discussion for us. And I don't want to get off the topic of Bhutan, but I've recently come back from a couple of weeks in Greece, and being focused with some lifestyle medicine colleagues in Greece. One of the things that I came away with this year, which I haven't previously, is wondering about the role of simplicity and frugality in health and well-being. And it kind of intersects with what you're talking about, I think. So let's bookmark that as a topic for future discussion.
Well, I don't know if we've chatted, off the record, but I'm working on a new book at the moment, and the title of the book is called Enough, and and the subtitle is A Manifesto for the Wellbeing of People and the Planet, and exploring the whole idea that you're just mentioning, simplicity, perhaps potential frugality, how that might actually be really helpful for both physical and mental health, as well as the health of the planet. So let's chat about that sometime.
Yeah, okay, done.
So look, great trip. So how it came to be is I'm Yong-Youth, Dr. Yong-Youth, who is a fascinating man.
Yeah,
and
yes.
he is. You've met Yong-Youth. He's the president of the Thai Lifestyle Medicine Association, and a medical doctor, but also a media personality over there. I felt very privileged to meet him because he's quite famous in Thailand.
And retired from a military career as well.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So an amazing man and doing great work. So Yong-Youth, if you're listening, we applaud you, brother. But his story is that he was doing some media work, and the royal family of Thailand loved him, and for good reason. He's very articulate, and he's bilingual, and has a lovely tone to his voice, like you do, Simon. And so they said, any stories that are covered on the royal family of Thailand, we want Dr. Yong-Youth to be covering that. So to this very day, so he's been doing that for decades now.
Yeah, wow.
And so, and because he has this, this lovely relationship with the royal family of Thailand, who know the royal family of Bhutan very well, they arranged this first ever the joint Thai Bhutanese lifestyle medicine and harmony wellbeing conference. And so I was invited to go, and so flew into Bangkok, and then we had a chartered flight to take us from Bangkok over to Paro in Bhutan. What I didn't know, because I was sitting on the plane with my noise-cancelling headphones, is that we were stopping over in Calcutta in India on the way over. And so I promptly, when the plane stopped, got my stuff and walked off the plane. And it was only as I reached the front of the immigration line that I saw a sign that said India. I thought, that looks odd.
Lift is supported by the Lift Project, an educational adventure where you learn science-based ways to lift your mood and your life. The Lift Project is lifting lives around the globe in healthcare settings, workplaces, schools, universities and communities. To find out more, visit theliftproject.global.
And then someone came racing over and grabbed my arm and said, quick, follow me, hurry. And I'm like, where are we hurrying to? And I was still, maybe I was jet lagged. I don't know what was going on for me. But anyway, they hurried me back onto the same plane, where I noticed that all the other delegates that were going to the conference were still sitting there. And I'd almost got through customs, through immigration, and would have spent some time in India instead of Bhutan. But anyway.
This podcast could have had a whole other focus. I could have been speaking to you from one of those 7-star hotels in Mumbai. Or
you could have.
Yeah.
Or it could have gone the other way too. We could be. But anyway, what was lovely, because this was actually, Bhutan's actually quite a difficult country to travel to. You need to have a guide. So
there's a lot of and that's the purpose of that is to preserve the integrity of the country, I believe.
That's correct.
Tourists can't just enter and wander freely.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so we had because there were 70 of us in total that had travelled over from Bangkok, and so we had a couple of guides, or several guides with us, which was great, and it was really being hosted by the royal family, and so we had a special attendance from the Queen Mother. And I can tell you, I was thoroughly impressed with her. She has been very actively involved in campaigning for the wellbeing, and very supportive of this gross national happiness. And I think obviously she's been quite influential on, the kings as they've journeyed through. And so it was lovely to hear from her, and she actually addressed the conference. and shared her dreams and their visions and some of the work that they've been doing along the way. And then get this, Simon, get this. And at the end, she said, hey, so, I'd like to invite some of you to come and have high tea with me. And so they had this special little, area set up outside, and yours truly got invited. And so I actually got to sit on one of those little couches right in front of the Queen Mother and got to ask some questions. And it was lovely. But, and because of course that I'm a high tea kind of guy. That's how.
And I'm also noticing that you didn't come home with a doggy bag with some leftovers for me.
No, exactly. That's right. You're well noticed. Look, it was great.
Cool.
It was
how cool. So the Queen Mother must be. So is she the mother of the current king? Is it correct?
You know what? That's a great question. I didn't know how.
And if she is, she must be also the wife of the former king.
I'm actually not sure whether that is the case or whether she. And I should have fact checked all this before we talked about it. I almost got the impression she may have been the mother of the Queen. So I'm not sure whether she was sort of in-law or. So I'm not sure, but she's certainly been very involved the whole, for many, many years in this space. And was very articulate around, their dreams and aspirations and what they're planning. And that's, I suppose, what I'd love to chat about a little bit before we wrap up. But what I will say before we do is we go there. We got to do a bit of tourists. So saw some of the great sites. Did the hike up to the Dragon Nest Monastery. Incredible. Like this is, it's over 3,000 meters, and I actually was surprised at how, you actually really do feel this. But then to see these monastery perched on the edge of a cliff, and you think the monks built this and carried, one brick up at a time, kind of thing. Incredible. So it was really that was a real eye opener, and I really enjoyed getting to see. And go, travel and go through some of the temples and all the rest of it. But here's the interesting thing. So this whole idea of, and this is what I sort of came away and thought a lot about, this idea of gross national happiness.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a great thing. Like and I love the concept of it, and I really applaud the intentionality behind that. And what I think also is it demonstrates such courage in that. Everyone else is doing this, everyone's pushing for this, economic growth. What's the GDP? How's our country going, and measuring it by that success? And I think, Martin Seligman talks about this a bit, because there actually has been done quite a bit of research done on Bhutan. I know in their school systems, they did a lot of work in positive education, which is sort of positive psychology applied to the educational context. And Martin Seligman, makes this point. He says, when people focus on things like economic growth, like GDP, well, do you know what? Anything that stimulates the economy actually contributes to that. And that might be building a new prison. That might be selling another medication. These are all good for the economy. Are they good for the people? And are they good for the well-being of the people? So
turning thousands of acres of rainforest into industrial land to build a factory on, all of those things will stimulate the economy. It
makes great economic sense to do that, but it doesn't contribute to the, particularly if you're displacing people or whatever it might be, it doesn't contribute to the overall national happiness. So I think it's so courageous, and hearing the stories about. Particularly the fourth king, who was obviously the one that really pushed hard for this. I thought, wow, he's a leader here is a selfless leader, who is actually a self-sacrificing leader, because there was a relinquishing of power in doing this, and stepping down and doing the best for the people. I think that's a beautiful thing, and that's obviously supported.
So can I ask you a couple of questions about this?
Sure.
Maybe you're going to cover this, and also maybe you don't know the answers to these, because it sounds like you spent a lot of time, climbing up to look at monasteries and sipping high tea with the Queen. So maybe you didn't have time to think about these things. But so the first thing I'm curious about is what does this metric translate into? For example, do we know how happy Bhutan is as a nation, and whether that's whether their happiness is increasing over time or decreasing over the time, or kind of staying as it is?
Okay, great question. So the short answer to that is, on the world rankings, they don't do that great. So it's probably about, I think, 2019 was the last time that they were sort of included in the measuring of the world happiness rankings. And out of around whatever number of countries are, maybe 160-ish or so, they were 95th. So now on first glance, then you go, well, wait a sec. Well, this ain't working, because even though there's this intentionality around it, when you look at the world rankings, I mean, my country of Australia, we normally get around 10-ish. I think we've got to 9th before. Sometimes we drop out.
And I think isn't Finland number one?
It's those countries. It's Denmark,
the Scandinavian countries.
They're typically rate the highest. So you think, oh, well, you know what? Maybe this isn't such a great story. But what you do need to recognise is that in those world happiness rankings, how do they do that ranking? And a big portion of it actually relates to standard of living.
Yeah, and income.
And so you've got this. If there's a lot of emphasis and weight placed on that, well, clearly this isn't a economically flourishing country. In fact, the capital, Thimphu, has not one traffic light in it. But do you know what?
Is that right?
Yeah, no traffic lights. So in fact, I don't think there's any traffic lights in the entire country. And
I want to live in that capital.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. So you know what? They don't. If that's a surrogate for standard of living, I'm happy to go with that.
And is the traffic therefore chaotic, or is the level of traffic commensurate with having no traffic lights?
No. So you've only got a population of 800,000 people.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. There has been this. It hasn't gone nuts. So it's quite. It's not it's definitely not population dense, so it doesn't need traffic lights. But so the standard of living, well, it's obviously not at Denmark and Finland's standard. And if that counts, if that's factored a lot in, and there's a lot of weight placed upon that in terms of determining how happy a country is, well, then obviously expect them not to do well. If in terms of is it growing? Doesn't seem like in 2019, when they actually did the World Happiness Rankings, you've got to bear in mind they surveyed about 1.4% of the population, and so you've got
1.4% of the world population, or the Bhutanese population,
of the Bhutanese population of Bhutan. And so in previous years there had been about a 3% shift in happiness metrics, but when you're talking about these sort of small subsamples of people being surveyed. So it's hard to get a hold on that. And to my best of my knowledge, it was about 2019 that the last time it was actually included in those sort of world rankings. Maybe things have changed now. So that's interesting. And then you've got also, interestingly enough, when I mentioned that I was from Australia, there was almost like nearly or certainly from the people in in the ministry and people in government, people who had obviously some financial position, most of them had family in Australia, intriguingly enough. And so many people were coming back to Australia and either immigrating to Australia. I think there was one year there were about 1.5% of their population had actually immigrated to Australia, either to study or work. And so,
is there a net exodus of population from Bhutan?
My understanding is a declining population in Bhutan,
which is characteristic in a lot of nations in the world.
Yes, it is. Many nations are going that direction.
Well, not declining populations, but declining birth rates.
Yes,
and so population growth is being supported only by immigration.
That's correct. Yeah. So, one might say, well, if it's such a happy place, then why are people going elsewhere? And once again, it might be just for study purposes, and they might return. But
so do you know what metrics are? I mean, what sorts of things are measured to determine happiness within the country?
Yeah, look, to be honest, I've never done the assessment tool myself, but I think it is quite holistic. They're trying to capture, I think there might be about 5 different domains. So obviously there's, we think happy, and we sort of think about psychological wealth. It's capturing all these other things, and as I've already implied, standard of
And
living
we've spoken before. I think perhaps on that episode that we recorded where we looked at the idea of enough, which was a few months ago now. Well, I remember we spoke about the idea that income and money does actually bring happiness. Contrary to the phrase, money doesn't buy happiness. Money does buy happiness, but only to a certain point.
Yes.
And once you reach that point, then money over and above that really contributes nothing more to happiness. So the interesting question then is, what is that figure, and which countries nationally are below that, and which countries nationally are above that?
Yeah. It's I suppose. Now, look, this is a very biased perspective, because it's very centric to me. But traveling around, the people seemed, like I certainly felt very safe there, very, very safe. And look, I think characteristic often of Buddhist countries, and it's predominantly a Buddhist country, the people are friendly and peaceful, and wanting to perpetuate that. So look, I certainly felt like it was a nice place. Like that was just my gut, as I said, N of one, but that was my impression. So look, I think there's obviously challenges around the metrics and how it's measured, and then how you even go about achieving something like that. But I suppose what I took away from it, and this is probably the key message I'd like to communicate, is how commendable is this, for a country, and particularly a leader of a country, to go, hey, you know what, I want to be intentional about this. This is what matters most. And I think for me, that's a real challenge to all of us, right? And it's not just relating at a national scale, but even at a personal level. I think being deliberate and intentional about asking that question of what matters most, and I find that I think that if we were to do that, it might influence the decisions we make and the things that we pursue, as to what is truly important. Because I think it's very easy to get swept along in the current. Everyone's doing this, everyone's pursuing GDP, and then to go counter current and go, well, you know what? No, I think there might be a better way. That is very courageous, and I think that there's a lesson that we can all learn from that as well. To what extent we get swept along in our lifestyle behaviours.
There's that phrase, isn't there? It's some variation of what's measured matters. The things that we actually take the time to measure. In fact, a different way of saying this is that the act of measurement is an indication of what's important to us.
Yeah.
Whatever we're measuring shows what matters to us. Yeah, I
agree. So look, I think my takeaway, my conclusion is amazing place, and I feel I was very, very privileged to go and visit and see it firsthand, and what certainly what I got from a very strong sense from their government leaders, and from even from the Queen Mother herself, that this is what's important to us, and this is you can be a critic of what could be done that's not being done, or whatever it might be, but there is a very deliberate intentionality around, hey, how do we move forward, and how do we prioritize human flourishing? What decisions can we make that are best for the people? And I just found that just very, very inspiring, to be honest. So anyway, gross national happiness. It's a great idea. It's a great concept. And in terms of a country, Bhutan, if you ever get the chance, I'd highly encourage you to get along, explore the place. It's quite remarkable.
It sounds beautiful. So I've got my own takeaway from this discussion.
Mm.
I remember you sharing a little earlier that I think you said you landed first in Bangkok and then you were on a chartered flight, and there were 70 of you. There's a delegation of 70 going to this lifestyle medicine conference. So my takeaway is that 69 people managed to get the memo, stay on the plane. We're not there yet, and Professor D. Morton of Australia jumps off the plane in a flurry with his noise-cancelling headset, half on, half off, papers flying everywhere, and almost ends up spending the rest of his days in a small fishing village on the west coast of India. That's my takeaway.
That is a great takeaway. I hope that our listeners have a better mental image of what actually transpired. But, good chatting.
Lift is presented by Simon Matthews and Darren Morton. It's sponsored by the Lift Project and supported by Avondale University. Music provided by Pixabay. If you have a question or a topic you would like to hear more about, send us an email to podcast@theliftproject.global. The Lift Project. Lift your mood, lift your life.